Hey everybody, Mungo Dark Matter here. Today I'm going to talk about who Shazam is and who Captain Marvel is. I'm not going to lie to you, this is going to get kind of complex, so you might want to get a pad of paper and a pencil and take notes. Or maybe not, just listen. How about that? Alright, anyway, so Captain Marvel originated like back in the 30s or the 40s. He was the most popular comic book character, superhero of the 40s, even more popular than Superman. Now the Captain Marvel I'm talking about was the original Captain Marvel, which is not the one in the movie. The original Captain Marvel is in the movie Shazam, and the character is now called Shazam. But that gets a little complex, doesn't it? So let's just start from the beginning. The original character, Captain Marvel, is just like in the movie, was like a kid, and he could say the word Shazam, and he would become Captain Marvel. He was given that power. So, it was a very popular comic book character, or superhero, but there was like some legal issues with the character, because DC Comics, who created and owns the rights to Superman, tried to sue Fawcett Comics, which created Captain Marvel, because they say that the character Captain Marvel was pretty much a copy of Superman, which in a sense he was, because he had kind of a lot of the same powers, wore a cape and all that stuff. Although I think Captain Marvel actually had a more interesting twist to have like a kid who could change into Captain Marvel by saying a word. So that was kind of the Captain Marvel's twist, but ironically he was more popular than the original Superman. So DC Comics in like the early 50s took Fawcett Comics to court and tried to sue over the rights of Captain Marvel, saying that it infringed on Superman. Well, wouldn't you know it, the lawyers got messed into this, and the Fawcett lawyers actually found some comics from some of the early Superman where they forgot to put the copyright notices. Now, copyright law is different back then than it is now. Now you don't even have to put a copyright notice on something for it to be copyrighted. But back then there were particular rules that were a little more stringent than they are now. So actually, for about 2 years, what happened in the first court case, for about 2 years, DC really lost the exclusive rights to Superman because the judge said their copyright was not valid, and that anybody could actually create a Superman comic. So naturally, DC Comics, since Superman was their bread and butter, they took the case back to court and they won. And so what happened was, this was in the 50s, and comics were kind of in a slump as opposed to where they were in like the 40s and the 30s and stuff. I guess that was mainly because of TV, although I thought comics were still pretty popular in the 50s. But Fawcett decided they did not want to take the case back to court, and they were just they stopped publishing Captain Marvel comics. So after a couple of years, Marvel Comics, who said, hey, Captain Marvel would be a cool name for one of our characters, because, hey, we're Marvel Comics, what would be cooler than Captain Marvel? So they actually copyrighted the name, and they created a character who was a man at the time. And see, it gets very complex, because current Captain Marvel is a woman, right? So anyway, so they took that and they copyrighted it, and they did some comics with Captain Marvel initially. And Captain Marvel in the Marvel comics was never as popular as the original Captain Marvel. So then what happened was even odder, because Fawcett Comics started to go bankrupt, so they sold the rights to all of their comics to DC Comics, and then so the DC Comics had the rights to actually do Captain Marvel. Well, since the interim in between when they actually ended up with the rights to Captain Marvel and between when Fawcett stopped producing Captain Marvel, because Marvel Comics had the trademark on Captain Marvel, they decided instead of going back to court again, because they weren't having a lot of luck with that Captain Marvel court case thing. I mean, they lost the rights to Superman for like 2 years. So what they did was they said, we'll call the character Shazam. The reason they called the character Shazam is because Shazam is a word that Captain Marvel uses, or what's his name, Billy, the kid that turns into Captain Marvel. He says Shazam to turn into Captain Marvel. Real quick aside here is, if you've ever seen the TV show Gomer Pyle, or you've seen the character Gomer Pyle on the Andy Griffith Show, which were both shows from the 60s, the character Gomer Pyle says Shazam all of the time. And I never really realized this, but he's probably saying that because of the comic strip, because that's where the word Shazam comes from, because I looked it up. So he probably read Captain Marvel or Shazam, and that's where he got that, his trademark little Shazam thing. He would say Shazam when he was surprised. All right, that's neither here nor there. So here's another interesting thing about the character Captain Marvel. So I guess Marvel Comics did various kind of versions of Captain Marvel over the years, and it was kind of an on and off thing, I guess. Captain Marvel was never really very popular for Marvel Comics, not one of its most popular characters or superheroes. And Marvel has a lot of superheroes, so they have so many superheroes, some of them are, more famous than others. So in 2012, that's when they came up with the current, they used the name Captain Marvel, and they created the current character, which is, what's her name, Carol Danvers or something like that, who's the character in the movie, actually. So that character's only actually existed since 2012, which another thing I didn't really realize, because I never really kept up with the Marvel Captain Marvel, because I've always kind of been into more of the original Captain Marvel. There actually was a TV show during the 70s, a Saturday morning kids show, with a live-action Captain Marvel. And the odd thing is, they weren't calling him Captain Marvel anymore in the comic strips, but in the show they called him Captain Marvel. So I don't know the story on that. And the story's too complex already. At any rate, so that's when we get the Captain Marvel now. So people who are really into comics and comic books may have like a slight kind of, how people are who are into comics, science fiction and stuff, they get kind of attached to certain things, don't they? Yes, they do. And so, like, if you're attached to the original Captain Marvel, then you're kind of mad about the new Captain Marvel. Or you could be, just because you're thinking, well, that's just kind of a ripoff. So it seems a little bit unfair to people that new Captain Marvel's named Captain Marvel. They probably should come up with a new name for her. I think it's a great character and a great concept, really, actually. But the name, there's a little thing going on with that name, if you know what I mean. Shazam is not a great name for a superhero. In fact, in the movie, they kind of make fun of that, because they're trying to figure out a name for him in the movie, and they never actually name him Shazam in the movie. So that's the story of Shazam and Captain Marvel. Is at least as I know it. That's just kind of just convoluted and strange, isn't it? Well, I'm Mungo Dark Matter, and whatever you do, enjoy the day, and I will see you soon. Say hi to Shazam and Captain Marvel for me if you see them. Just if you see them. And go out and, I've actually seen the Shazam movie. I enjoyed that a lot. I have not seen the Captain Marvel movie yet, but go see either one of them. They're still out. They're still both out. See you soon.